Stuff with it?
That man does, but they don't accept them. They charge them a lower fee.
Oh,
We're
all right.
blasting off here. Good morning. Today is Thursday, April 20th, 2023. It's 8:30 a.m. We're resuming work on H158, an act relating to the beverage container redemption system. It's a bottle bill. So we've, and to preview the morning. So we're looking at, we're going to do some committee discussion and with an eye towards working towards a final draft, possible edits, etc., on both the bottle bill and the RDS bill later this morning, and add in, as time allows, confirmations for members of the committee that have their appointment research done. So on 158, I thought we would, we have information from Chittenden Solid Waste District that Senator Whitehead asked for. I think, I thought maybe we would wait for her to come in before going to that. Otherwise, I thought probably a useful thing to do at this point is slow back down again and walk through as a committee and talk about what we have flagged for further discussion. Also, engage in version control here. Make sure that they're all exactly the same text. And I think we've all received 2 letters from different folks, requests for us to consider. So I'm working off of the as passed by Dallas version. And Mr. O'Grady was scheduled to come in, but because I think really all we need is her own discussion at this point to settle on things that I don't. He's in short supply, so let's leave him in peace. So we really need the drafting. So let's. I'm just going to start.
Oh,
And here he is.
Sorry.
Good morning.
So
Sure. We were. So I wasn't sure. I know that you're extra busy this time of year. So if you have someplace you.
no, I'm sitting in here. I just got the note from Jude that it was canceled and then that it was not
Well, we were-
canceled.
That's me. That's me. I had thought you were might be like double booked or something, or needing to do something else. So I thought, okay, well, if we don't have council, we can still just walk through the bill and we're gonna kind of collate our edits, ask questions, get clear, and then come to your drafting requests. But it's all the better when you're here for sure. Well, let me check. Is there someplace you feel
I
like
don't have to be anywhere.
on fire to go to? Okay. So can we, I'd like to just go back and double check on page 1, can you fill us in again as a committee about the exceptions in beverage? Because I had asked you in the hallway about the rationale for what's in that list versus what's not in that list. And okay,
So,
hopefully for everyone to reconfirm why things are in and out.
okay. So the original exceptions were milk and dairy products. And then there was discussion that actually arose in Ways and Means, the first session of last biennium, about how some children are allergic to milk and dairy, and for their nutritional needs, they have to rely on plant-based beverages. And then someone brought up infant formula, and then someone brought up meal replacement, which is effectively a prescription drug in many cases. And so that's how those That's how milk, dairy products, plant-based beverages, and formula and meal replacement drinks for their nutritional value and their inherent importance for growing children, and then those who need meal replacement drinks as medicine.
So, because it would, was the thinking just that adding a deposit adds to the expense up
Yes,
front?
at the cost of purchase, yes, but that was the concern. And then non-alcoholic cider was added on the floor of the House as a floor amendment. It was argued that the farms that are producing non-alcoholic cider were just not capable of doing all that's required of a beverage manufacturer distributor, such as collecting the empties or remitting the sheets. So it was a 4 vote. Wow.
Okay. Okay, yes, Senator Watson.
Thank you. So on page 3, line 4, it says cider, and then it says it has the same meaning as wherever. I'm sure that doesn't present a conflict, but does that mean that cider?
The cider on page 3, line 4 is the alcoholic version.
So as defined there, it's hard.
Yeah, Title 7 is the alcohol
Okay.
title.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
Okay. And the types of containers, we just sort of walk through that one as well. The language changed from last year, and I just wanted to tune up on why we choose what we choose and how we express it.
So I think really, honestly, the big change there is, well, there's 2 big changes. One, getting rid of cartons, because cartons, there's no real recycled use of a carton except for if it's capable of being basically used as paper or cardboard. But most of them, like your orange juice container, aren't recyclable.
Right, they're multi-layered.
Multi-layered,
Yeah.
some have metal interfaced with the cardboard. Some have PFAS or something similar coating. They're not readily recyclable. A few years ago, there was testimony that there is technology to recycle them, but it's not available in Vermont yet. So carton was removed.
And then we went from plastic to,
That's the second change, because there's a lot of plastic containers that are just not recyclable. And most of those are not used for beverages. The majority of beverages are in HDPE or PET.
Yeah.
And so the committee just said, let's focus on those materials which have recycling markets.
the PET is one category.
I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head.
And it's high density polyethylene, basically the same material that a milk carton is made of.
Yeah.
Okay. And all right, so it was like, rather than plastic, be more specific and use the 2 types of plastic that are most commonly used.
Most
for the
commonly
majority
used for beverage containers.
Okay.
And then there was discussion of just saying aluminum. Then there was concern that would actually incent persons to circumvent the system by coming up with containers made of other metal. And so it just says aluminum or other metal.
Is that it was, oh, the metal,
Mhm.
and now it's aluminum or other metal, and why did we say that seems so odd since aluminum's a metal? Like, what do we?
It is, but the committee was really focused on those materials that are the most commonly used and most readily recyclable, and aluminum is
Metal between these colors on the spectrum.
that material.
Right,
You could say just metal. It would include aluminum, obviously, but the committee upstairs was really focused on those materials that are most commonly used.
right. It's fine, it's just like, whenever we do something like that, I figure there's a story behind calling one thing out or not. And I want to make sure we know why something's in or why we're saying it this way. If we keep on going, then we get into non-carbonated beverages, non-carbonated beverage containers for on greater than. So what's the thinking behind carbonated and non-carbonated? Why are we making that distinction?
It's twofold. There's the readability of recycling technology and whether they can accept containers larger than that, which they received testimony that they can't. Basically, those are kind of the common max sizes. There was discussion about going to a milliliter kind of standard instead of a liter standard, but this is what was recommended as the size limitations.
You know where, I mean, sorry to be fiddly, but I feel like we need to know why we for non-carbonated, it's 2.5 liters. For carbonated, it's 3 liters.
Again, I think that's kind of like the max common container for those types of beverages. And those two limits came out of kind of that, I wouldn't say it was the group that you coordinated last year, but definitely members of that group who were coordinating on this draft for this session.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, better watch it.
Thank you. I'm just trying to picture like when in my life have I ever seen a container of non-carbonated beverage available for sale, greater than 2.5 liters.
Think
Big
water,
ones.
Big
Like
water.
a big water.
like a camp water container. Have you ever gone camping in?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Sarah, good morning. So we're just doing a walkthrough to,
I bet it's about the bottle bill 158. Did I pick up the context?
you
You're
got it. And
We had 126 though. Did you do 126 already? No.
to 126 is first thing tomorrow morning. Yeah, just walking through with any kind of questions we have about the bill, if there are flagging things, if we want to make proposed changes, discuss changes, and then to get it ready for a vote when we.
Yeah, I don't have any changes that I'm thinking about at this point.
Yes, please.
In case it makes it faster, I think there's only one spot that I had either a question or possible suggestion.
Okay.
Where are you?
Well, not entirely sure, actually, unfortunately. I had just been chatting about this with Marcy, Ms. Gallagher, earlier. I'm thinking about small producers of wine, and thinking about, is there a way to have them participate financially, but not be obligated to receive back their bottles, because that was what seemed to be the problem. Which, as I understand, they wouldn't, a lot of folks don't take their bottles physically back anyway, but maybe making it clear that that is the case for small distributors.
So you could do that, but as consequences, obviously everything has consequences. So if you don't require them to take back, then they are not actually reimbursing for the deposit. Right?
Okay.
There's no flow of that nickel back through the system. Because when they sell to the retailer, they would collect the nickel on it. When the retailer sells to the consumer, the retailer collects the nickel on it. The consumer comes back to redeem the nickels. If they're not required to redeem or collect that, the nickels going where?
Could, is it possible that they could still be obligated to provide that nickel back, but not have to take back the physical bottles, like in their own facility, just like,
But where would the bottle then go?
I don't know, is that,
Marcy Gallagher would be very, if they didn't have to take it back at their own winery and gave it to a redemption center, is what you're saying.
yeah, right. And so from the redemption center, it would be, where would it go from there?
It would be collected by town. I think you're saying that the winery should be treated like an exempted retailer who
Right.
doesn't have to take back the containers that they sell, but they can still be returned to a redemption center, and they're still paying it to.
Yeah. Right. Is that,
And that's not how the bill functions now.
I mean, that there is one other aspect of it. So they're not paying any of the unclaimed sheets then as well.
they're not, sorry, say that again, they're not paying?
The sheets,
Yeah, right, yeah.
the abandoned beverage container deposits, because
Right.
there's no way. Well, I guess Tamara will be able to do the accounting for what comes back through Tamara, but or whoever the PRO is gonna be. I guess that could work. My next question is, do you have the same concern for small soda, small cider, small beer, small juice?
Good question.
So,
Yeah.
well,
sorry.
yeah, so, no, I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So what's the, how would you define the problem you're thinking, sort of trying to solve here? Just to make sure I follow.
Yeah, so the problem is that these small wineries who are also the retailers and distributors, packaged into one, don't have a lot of space. They don't have a lot of space to receive back the physical bottle. Could they still participate financially in the system and not have to physically house the returned bottles?
You not have to redeem. So not everyone has to redeem, right? I mean, we have, if you're a store under 5,000 square feet.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So I'm just wondering if you're running a small vineyard, I mean, Shelburne Vineyards has a pretty large facility right on Route 7 in South Burlington, but it seems like when I've stopped, I don't know if it's over 5,000
Yeah.
square feet that space.
Well, think Hill Farmstead. Has anybody been to Hill Farmstead? Sean sells cans from his warehouse.
Yeah.
And it's definitely bigger than 5,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So is Sean now collecting, or is he too small in your opinion?
So I think it might be, if the limit for not having to redeem is 5,000 square feet, then because they are all of these things, they're the retailer, they're the distributor, et cetera, that maybe for the purposes of the process, they can be treated as the retailer, and if their operation is less than 5,000 square feet, then that would be the,
Sure. So other states have exemption authority. You heard last week that Maine has a 50,000 gallon annual production. Some states do it on a case by case application. Iowa, you apply for an exemption based on criteria. Connecticut had an exemption process, but they just changed their law, and I tried to find their exemption form, and it's a little hard to find. I couldn't find it. I found all the links to it, but there's nothing there. California has an exemption process. I mean, you can build in an exemption process. I just don't know the unintended consequences of saying, and I guess I don't understand when you say that they will pay in financially. Will pay in financially what, to the PRO?
I imagine they'd have to. Yeah, and their bottles should still be redeemable. If I'm
No,
off
no,
base
it's-
here, I'm willing
Yeah.
to, like, talk,
Well, small producers, I mean, for this back and forth of wanting to have a comprehensive bill, and then small producers aren't well equipped
Yeah.
to deal with some of the things we're trying to do. I actually imagined, to make sure that it could work this way, that all the products would end up carrying the deposit, but that the PRO would provide a method for handling materials, especially if everything's bar coded, so you just know whose bottle or can you were handling, that system would be able to track that. And that's what I thought a more sort of sophisticated PRO would be capable of.
I think you could put in the provision that they don't have to collect or redeem, I should say. Oh, what's the threshold?
or not having to.
Right. Because you could have somebody like Sean that's got a big facility, but doesn't really actually produce that many containers subject to the deposit. And he does comply with the deposit law now.
He does or does not?
He does.
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting that it could be also like alchemists or Lawson's.
Well, they should already be compliant just with your plans, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything has the deposit on it.
Right. Citizen Cider, I mean,
Yeah, that would be.
it's in South Burlington, they got two facilities. One's kind of more just a restaurant, and the other is a warehouse. And so they're currently not subject to the deposit
These are not alcoholic ciders.
because cider is not currently subject to it because cider is considered wine under Title VII. And
So it's hard kombucha, I guess.
hard kombucha is, but when you brought wine in, kombucha technically it qualifies as wine because it's derived from the fermentation of plant material. And you had to make the distinction between whether hard kombucha was going to have a 5-cent deposit versus a 15-cent deposit. So that's why hard kombucha and cider are excluded from the definition of vinous beverage here, because they will have a 5-cent deposit, whereas wine bottle will have a 15-cent deposit. They are technically both vinous beverages because they're derived from the fermentation of plant material.
Wait a minute, so is whiskey.
Whiskey is, there's a separate definition of liquor and it's based on the alcohol percentage and the beverage.
Thank you, Chair Bright, and thank you, Senator Watson, for raising that point. So I'm trying to find in the bill where we would change that. And I remember we had seen language at one point that had that suggestion in it, whether it was from John McCann or someone else, that would add the exemption for the 5,000 square feet thing. That's not in the bill currently. Is that correct?
There is an exemption for redemption when the retailer,
Yeah, where is that? I was trying to find it while we were talking. But I am open to the conversation about the locations that just do not have the space to take the bottles back. I think that that's a hard ask. At the same time, I do respect what you're probing at, which is if we do it for one, why not do it for all? And for me, my value that I'm bringing to this is consistency and how the consumer experiences the system. So I would prefer to have fewer exemptions than exemptions, knowing that once you open it up, you have every person who possibly makes a beverage that could be falling under this wanting that same exemption. They might not have a lobbyist who is capable of making the case to us, which is kind of a problem generally.
so it's on page 6 going to page 7.
Okay, and then,
So the current 5,000 square foot exception for retailers.
okay, so we do that for retailers. So what would happen in the instance that you are, 'cause we had heard the concern that if you're a retailer, but you're also a winery, so your retail space might be different than your warehouse space. So if you've got a big warehouse and you can take back these bottles, it seems like we don't need to exempt you. But if you encompass 5,000 square feet for everything, perhaps that's the group that we're trying to.
I could work
respond
on
to.
language on that. And we would say something like the retailer's building or the building where the manufacturer or distributor sells directly to the consumer is less than 5,000 square feet.
That would make sense to me.
So that's like a literal winery person shows up, tries it. That
Doesn't
kind
have
of
tasting.
Yeah, yeah.
I could do that. Good luck.
Sure, and I just want to make sure that we're being clear. So if I have a 40,000 square foot space for making everything and I set up a counter on one side, I mean, some of these are not like separate buildings or separate sort of fancy spaces. So I'm just wondering, do you find a retail space within it?
Well, that's why I brought up Bill, because you walk into where they sell, at least last time I was there, you walked in and it was the warehouse. And he had a counter set up where what he was selling retail was stacked up behind it. And it wasn't Sean that I bought it from, it was the guy that moved over from Otter Creek. But, you know, it's
Not like a big room, it's just
right.
the space right inside the door.
Yeah.
Heard out to a 20-year study with a sunset.
That too.
I mean, I could picture to keep it truly to small operators. I feel like it's gotta be the combination, like if it's, you know, if your whole operation is small.
Okay.
Does that, I don't know if that.
So
helps.
sticking to the 5,000 square foot.
Sticking to the 5,000 square foot, but yeah, if you're, is that clear enough? Maybe-
So I'm just worried that it could be manipulated.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm
And
sorry.
what kind of things, this sounds like you're eighth graders.
Oh, this is an eighth grade discussion. By some of the best eighth grade students that exist on the planet.
Finding the loopholes. So what kind of things are coming to mind for you that you're saying, are we gonna end up with a problem that we might not want to create? The abuse of it.
Well, like, think of Hetty Topper. I mean, are they big or are they small? And is their retail space 5,000 square feet or not?
Right, right, like there's a retail space in the front end, and then there's the brewery right behind. And I think it's all one building.
Those are the least redeemed beers. People come to get them and then take them home to other states.
That is correct. They are a destination beverage.
Okay, Senator McCormick and Senator White.
If the
And
small,
Senator Watson.
if this, I was first on the list.
Yes,
I don't want to jump it, okay. If the smallness of the operation is the justification for the exemption, it seems to me also the same argument can be made that if it's small enough to be exempt, it's small enough to not need the exemption. In other words, you're not selling that much wine. If it's a tasting room, you're not even selling bottles, you're pouring, and the samplings.
They're allowed to sell at the
Yeah.
tasting rooms. You made that change a couple of years ago.
Okay, that's right.
all the
But
tasting rooms I know are,
they sell bottles. as
that's,
well.
yeah, it's like the lost, like, it's sample and purchase, I think, is their goal.
Yeah.
Well, then, if they got enough of a volume that the returns are a problem, probably they should take care of it. If we're making other people do it, like,
Yeah.
Or participate in the program, for sure. There's still a deposit.
Just to define it narrowly, I could picture saying something like for wine manufacturers that operate as retailer, manufacturer, and a distributor, if their operation is less than 5,000 square feet, then they will, if their whole operation, if all of that process is less than 5,000, there's probably a better way to define it, but if all three of those operations happens within less than 5,000 square feet, then of a building, then they will not. They may refuse to redeem beverage containers.
Really, isn't it just where the building where it's sold is less than 5,000 square feet?
Well, that works. I mean, that's.
Because you might have operation of multiple buildings. It's really where it's sold and where it would come back for redemption. That's the issue.
If that works for you, then that works for me.
Isn't that what we have though?
For retailers.
Yeah.
Well, and
So
so,
we'd be adding producer, distributors to that.
or maybe what we could say is for those wine manufacturers that are all three, something about like that the retail provision is
I get it.
is
I get it.
is like is the priority at the top. I don't, you know what I mean? Like, right,
yeah,
like
so
that
you're saying
applies.
If you're all three.
if you're
you
all
get-
three, then
You get the
that's-
exemption if you have
right.
the one.
So can you draft something, but not insert it, and we'll just look at it? And I'm just feeling, one of the things, I'm feeling like we're trying to imagine situations, and I'm feeling like I'm a little knowledge poor here, like what really goes on out there, like what do people actually need? Maybe you could check in with, and I can check in with the winery near me,
Yeah.
and maybe you can talk to your folks. I
Sure.
just want to make sure we're crafting something that actually
It's
is
helpful.
on target.
And also, I want to apologize that I didn't have language ready to go to suggest for this. So, thank you.
I heard about it Tuesday.
So I want to step back a little.
Yeah.
The wine experience. If you're buying, Paul Masson at the supermarket, you're gonna be bringing your bottles back to wherever bottles go, okay? And the
Kevin?
supermarket, what we're talking about here is probably two couples on a Saturday afternoon in October.
Now we're really going
Getting-
off the rails.
Well, no, but the idea is that wine is a fairly classy experience. It's a fairly elegant experience.
Ripple versus maybe.
It's not like my son's poster on his room, wine is how snobs get drunk. Okay. But it is a quality experience. And I'm wondering if someone who has dropped $30 for a bottle of wine is now going to come back and ask for their deposit.
Yeah,
I don't know if they're gonna show up at the winery when they're empty.
But they might go to the redemption center with all of their.
Right, so keeping the bottles in, I think makes sense. So
Yes.
just someone who's retailing them has to provide for redemption. Yeah. That's
Yes.
the nub of the problem, right? Small retailer, winery, not really set up to deal with the public open, selling it, not collecting bottles back.
The burden of collecting bottles back is commensurate with the amount of business they're doing in the first place and the nature of the business.
So how about you can draft something, but we'll keep it on the side till we're set, and then we can put it in if we're all settled, but I would encourage us to talk to some retailers, producers, so that we
Make a nice little shed back.
could be a field trip. Might have to make a field trip this weekend to do research.
The eighth grade factor, Chris, when you're dealing with business and square feet, and you go down to Lucky's trailer sales, you buy a trailer that is a tractor trailer that's too small to be commercially sold, it's used, and suddenly you've got
That
square
would be,
feet, it's a trailer.
that would be unattractive for the wine experience. But a
So-
nice
Not-
little,
It would fit Ripple, it wouldn't fit Chateau or whatever.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for entertaining that conversation, and that is my only suggestion. Otherwise, I'm happy with it as it is.
Same.
Carve out an exemption and put in a study to solve the complicated stuff in a certain amount of time.
PRO will have some work to do. I did want to note, Jen Holiday was kind enough to
Yeah.
provide the numbers for me if folks wanted to see that. I really appreciate her taking the time on that for how the Chittenden Solid Waste District will see commodity total loss. Although the numbers are less shocking than I had anticipated, so.
Yes, so
Seem-
you
I
have
mean-
been drilling in on this. You want
Yeah.
to, well, actually, so let's set this one.
Yeah.
I'd love to come back to this.
Yeah.
And have you sort of give us the guided tour since you had asked for that. While we still have this for radio, I want to just make sure we're covering the whole bill. So I had some questions for committee discussion based on conversations with folks in the last week, sometimes in committee, sometimes, outside committee time. On page 17, there's the schedule for beverage container redemption rates shall be satisfied by the specified dates. I wanted to double check sort of how this would work. And so in 2026, we start with 75%. And I don't know if Mr. O'Grady, you happen to know the number, or Ms. Gallagher, you're here. If you know the current redemption rate, so it says 75% for 2026. And is that where we currently are?
Yeah, so it's around 75.
Okay. So the operation of, we're not going live with the whole program until 2027. So is this just establishing a baseline? I'm trying to figure out why we're including a number prior to full implementation.
So it is really, I would say the program, this starts in 2025, because that's when you start getting reports from A&R about what the recycling rate is.
Yeah.
And so it may go below 75%. There's no guarantee that it maintains at 75% over the next 2 to 3 years. So that is reach that goal in 2026. Then it expands. There may actually be a dip in percentage at that point because the scope has expanded and the amount of containers redeemed. Like, are you gonna redeem your juice containers or put them in the blue bin? And so there will need to be a change in practice by the households effectively. So there might be a reduction in percentage redemption rate at that point.
Which triggers,
If it happens 2 years in a row, as determined by A&R, it will trigger an increase in the deposit of that beverage category.
true environmentalists hoard their containers for 2 years.
For the hope of having a revenue waterfall of some sort.
No, I'm just being an 8th grader, then that would result in a higher deposit.
I guess if all of the true environmentalists wanted to coordinate to retain their containers for 2 years in order to drive the deposit up on everyone, and they did it in such a scope, I guess that's theoretically possible.
And they would be financially rewarded when they eventually return the bottles.
It's theoretically possible. Practically unlikely.
8th graders are creative. There's nothing else. Of course, they can't buy wine. So.
So, so my concern was I'm gonna need to, for myself, together a timeline of what happens precisely, because of the concern I have, and
I have a timeline.
we do,
I can give it to you.
that would be great. Because what I'm having trouble seeing, just looking at the words as opposed to like a timeline, is if we expand what is included and the public has to learn what's included, and it takes a while to get the thing up and running, we might have, if we've expanded the definition of what should be collected, but people are still blue binning things that now could be part of the beverage system, end up seeing a net reported drop in redemption, and that you might have, there's that learning phase where people figure out what they need to do. And I'm just wondering if by having this trigger, if we're gonna end up triggering it almost for sure, because we'll see a dip in redemption below what we're currently doing, and then we'll end up going to a dime without a sort of that we're almost signing up for the dime from the get-go. That
Not necessarily,
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I like about the language on page 18, lines 6 through 16, is it says beginning January 1, 2028, if the secretary determines, then it goes up. But then it says it gives the manufacturers 1 year to comply with that. That gives you, the General Assembly, opportunity to weigh in if you want something to change, if you want to give that time for the increase of the deposit, or if you want to forestall the increase in the deposit, or what this language does, the way that it's set up, it gives you opportunity to intervene. And so it's an automatic escalator, but it has a kill switch on it, which is you.
Can you point, sorry, I was catching up, what link are you citing?
So page 18,
Line 6?
line 6,
Yeah.
that's beginning on January 1, 2028. If the secretary determines redemption rate goal established was not met for one or more, to the beverage container deposit for the category shall increase by 5 cents. But then on page 18, line 13, within 1 year following the secretary's determination, manufacturers and distributors shall comply with the labeling requirements of this title before assessing the relevant deposit established under this subsection. So they've got a year before they are required to collect at the increased deposit. So you have, hopefully you'll be in session during that time frame. I don't know how you would not. You have your ultimate policymaking authority to decide if you want it to go into effect or not.
The time, this says shall increase by 5 cents. And what's the timing for that increase?
A year from the secretary's determination. A&R doesn't like the secretary's determination language. At least that's what they testified to in the House. I don't know if they brought that issue up with you.
Yeah, they would prefer not to be the owners of the,
To me, that's just a factual contingency.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a delegation of the decision. It's a factual contingency. I have memoranda on the constitutionality of that.
Since we're directing it, it's not.
It's
We're
not
basically
the
making-
opinion.
Yeah.
It's basically based on fact. You will actually get a report back from them with the recycling rates for each beverage category. So even if they don't make a determination, you will have the data to determine if the redemption rate has not been met. So if they attempt to circumvent that responsibility, you can circumvent their responsibility.
Okay, and the line 13 through 16, is this because if it were to increase from 5 to 10 cents, that you'd have different labeling?
You will have to label, if you're gonna comply with the labeling requirements, you have to put the amount of the deposit on it, and you will, depending on the date of the determination, you're gonna have inventory in the system that's got the 5 cent label on it. I mean, you have just run into this issue with the ready-to-drink cocktails. Because the ready-to-drink cocktails were being sold as liquor with 15-cent label deposits on them. And then the liquor bill last year turned them from liquor into ready-to-drink cocktails, and they were no longer subject to the 15 cents. But since they're carbonated, they were subject to the 5 cents. But there are all these containers out there on the market in the inventory with 15 cents on them. So A&R was like, all right, you can still sell them, but you have to basically redeem them at the 15 cent.
Wow.
Right, so you're making a dime, all right. The labeling requirements also just say you don't have to list the amount on there, right? You can.
Now, the label, you do need to list the amount.
The refund value of the container.
Right.
Oh, sorry, the refund value of I thought they were all ordered. And so on page 7, ABC, you have to have, just misreading, this is not refund value or the word refund value or the letters are the the first one is a requirement, and then B and C are or.
Yes,
Okay, I misread it as or.
Oh. I
So
did
it's
not
an and, in a way, the refund value of the container and the words refund
actually,
value.
that could be clarified. I need to talk to A&R about,
Because I thought it was an
Oh, pick
opportunity to
one.
not list
right,
the number,
Mhm,
which would simplify life. And you're just identifying it as part of the Vermont system, whatever the price is, it's the price. We're
mhm.
gonna have to go back and remanufacture.
Yeah.
Okay, if we can check that one out, see how that works. But regardless of, that, is that a desirable provision to have? I had thought it was more manufacturer friendly, if you could just simply say, you know, VTRV, Vermont Redemption Value, and then you're in the program. You don't have to say the number, and you don't end up with these inventory issues.
Oh, because if the recycling rate doesn't, yeah, I
Right.
guess that would be the one situation. Sure.
Right.
you will still have labeling issues, especially if the beverage container is wine or liquor,
Oh, because,
right? Because in Mexico, the biggest selling, most popular selling tequila bottle isn't changing their label to say it's now 20 cents.
right,
They're producing new stickers. And so they've already sold into the state bottles that have 15 cents on them, or that DLL have put the stickers on that are in inventory. You gotta give time for that inventory to clear. So you're gonna have that issue with liquor and wine will have that issue. So,
okay. So if you can send us that timeline, that'd be handy. I'm feeling like I just want to walk through and understand the mechanics more clearly, because just want to make sure that there's like the baton pass is clear. For me, it isn't entirely clear yet. Others may be there, but I'm not quite there. All right, so then the other question I have for the committee is, and it seems like a fair question, if the redemption rate falls or doesn't meet the schedule, then there's a trigger to go to a higher number. The assumption is that a higher value will make more people more interested in the redemption rate will go up. I think A&R expressed the concern that that's not the only tool they would like to see, and it might require more citizen education and outreach, might try to improve the ease of redemption, stuff like that, increase the redemption rate by doing things other than the amount of the deposit. And I don't know if that's precluded in any way. But I think that the concern I heard from A&R was, we're giving them one tool to address the not meeting redemption rate, and they are feeling like they would like to have more than one tool. So I think I'm asking council in part, this is one thing that we're building into the bill as a way to drive redemption up, but it's not the only tool. And if I'm just looking at what other provisions there are.
well, there is an education requirement as part of the stewardship plan.
Yeah,
And there's reporting that's required about the success of the description of their educational materials. What is not in here, and which is often in an EPR bill, is the ability of A&R to require amendment of the plan if it's not achieving the goals of the plan. So you could add that.
seems like I can't remember what we were doing. We had language like that on other EPR stuff, right?
Yes, it's pretty common in other EPR.
So if you could find language for us to look at, that we did this before, it seems like it would make a commonsensical thing that, could see what's going on and require the PRO to take steps to improve its performance.
Are you thinking of that in as something to do in parallel with the potential increase or instead of?
I would think it could be in parallel. Both things could happen. All I was really trying to do is not have us say, that's the only tool we have to try to turn up the redemption rate. And it might be effective, but it might not. But what if easy redemption is part of the reason we're seeing lower rates that we hope? How do we get at that?
That is what some of the other EPR programs, the redemption rate is not being met. The agency has the ability to require amendment of the plan to increase education or increase convenience of a requirement of redemption. Requirement.
I think it's back at that whole thing of sort of the ideal of it should be as easy to redeem a bottle as it was to buy it in the first place. Okay, one other question I had on my marked up on my for consideration by the committee was, and I would want to get testimony on it, but we've talked about this in previous EPR bills as a post-consumer waste provision. That really gets into packaging, and I don't know if that's far enough outside this bill that we want to consider it or not. So I guess I owe it to the committee to bring language and writing to the committee as opposed to floating out a concept. But I'm trying to think if we have prior work on packaging included a post-consumer waste provision in the package, in the containers themselves. And I'm wondering if the committee is interested in entertaining, helping build the recyclables market by including a post-consumer waste provision in the Vermont container description provision. I think probably we would be modifying. I don't know how we would do it, but we've talked about it before. So,
I am interested in that, but I feel like that's a big lift.
yeah,
And I am just conscious of that, like, I want time and like, I want to do this bill and that bill and all of them, and so yes, but maybe next year.
So I would ask for clarity on what you're proposing, because PET, HDPE, aluminum, and glass all have post-consumer recycling content. So aluminum is like pretty much 100%. PET's HDPE or not, but and glass is debatable depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
So what are you looking at for a requirement?
I'm in a fuzzy way that's not being particularly helpful to the committee, recollecting previous conversations about including a post-consumer waste provision in our package and the discussions around packaging containers.
Provision, what do you mean by provision? Rules of what has to be done or just some?
I think when we were looking at packaging before, we talked about in order to build a market for recyclables, we would say that containers sold in Vermont would contain a certain percentage of recycled material. And it was about building the market for the materials whose handling we were trying to improve. But it's a whole new topic, so I don't want to act.
I mean, I can look at it. I mean, I think when it last came up, it was in the context of the packaging EPR program, which was a broader scope,
Right.
and actually exempted the beverage container from that system. But I can go back and look to confirm that.
Well, I'm gonna read the room and say, we don't, let's not open that door.
Let's not open that door now.
Yeah.
We'll have, people will be pressuring us. There will be momentum once this bill passes to actually look at this, because it could have an implication for the folks who have told us that they're worried about some of the portions of the bill.
Sure.
So I think that, in fact, this would be a 1-2 punch if we waited.
If we, yeah, okay, so I'm gonna,
Yeah.
I'll leave post-consumer waste alone.
Well said, Junior.
Thank you, Senior.
All right, anything else that anyone wanted to ask about, get clarifications from council, propose an edit? So we'll look at a small producer, language, and other than that, I think people are not proposing any other edits.
When would you like that?
If we could get something, end of day Monday. Well, tee it up for circulating and voting.
Just before we wrap this up.
Yeah.
Just throw a monkey wrench in this late. In fact, I won't. If no one else feels the way I do, maybe I'll just have to be a team player. But I'm not sure how to answer Casella. The argument that they're part of a system that they've engaged in good faith, and we're sort of pulling the rug out from under them.
I think that that's a good thing to be worried about. I also think that they are going to make a profit motivated suggestion, because they will potentially lose revenue with things going to redemption. And I totally respect that's their job to come to us and express that. I have some questions around the Chittenden Solid Waste District numbers and kind of how they're calculating the loss of some of the commodities, because what numbers we got from Jen, and I know that's separate from Casella, they're also discussing, will Casella be charging them more money? So there's a lot of contractual things that
Yeah.
we can't, I feel, weigh in on about what the cost will be for them as businesses. I respect the point that they're making, both Casella and the Solid Waste District, with their financial ability to make this work. However, don't feel, for my group of folks in Windsor County, I don't think they're as concerned with the profitability of Casella as they are the implications of us not properly dealing with our waste. So I totally respect what Casella is saying as a business. However, I do think that as a government, we have a different obligation. So it's like, we're not gonna, there's a natural tension. They're correct. They're saying what they need to say. However, there's a larger priority for me. And unfortunately, that means that they as a business will possibly have some lower value to some of the commodities that they are attempting to sell.
I think
I don't know, like, the harm's there, it can't be.
Well, and so because I agree, and I think another way to think of it is that I feel like we as a society have outsourced the costs of our waste at every level and in a variety of ways. And so this is just one way to sort of true up what the costs are of our waste. If we were really a circular economy, then we would not have these problems. Or the problems would be different. They would not be, yeah.
I think our job as government is to protect the public interest. And the public interest. And when that inconveniences a private company's interests, our priority has to be the public interest. And we say to them, you're gonna have to figure out a way to make a profit with this being the rules. Because the rules are set up not for you, they're set up for the public interest. And that's sort of where you fall on that is sort of the spectrum. I mean, our conservative colleagues would say the business of America is to do business. And, you know, you've got to not do this because it's bad for business. There are people who would say, I don't care. All I care. We generally pursue the public interest with some sense that people do have to do business here. But there's another wrinkle in this, which is we have affiliated private business with our pursuit of our protection of the public interest. They're part of the system. And
Core to it.
that was sort of the deal we made. Here's the system to protect the public interest. And here's something that we don't want. There are countries where the government does what Casella does. You could do that. Here's the public interest, here's the government, take care of the public interest. That's your job, you're the government. And we don't do that. We say, well, you know, we got some public aspect to it. And then we say to business, you know, you can make a profit on this part of our protection. And now all of a sudden, we're gonna change the rules on you after you've invested.
Well,
I don't think that-
fair play is fair play. The bottling industry, and you take soda, for example, and beer, had a system for decades where for them, their economic interest was get the bottle back and refill it. It's cheaper than the
Yeah,
alternative.
yeah.
And then they made a decision to say, the heck with that. We don't have to take any bottles back. No deposit, no return. The hell with our old system that we, the bottlers, had
Yeah.
designed. Let the public deal with it.
Yeah.
Let them deal with it. You know, we'll sell it to them and no deposit, no return, and it'll be their trash to deal with.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
No, I think you're absolutely right, but I think that's a separate question. I think you're absolutely right. We subsidize
Yes,
the beverage company.
we do.
We do it. It is a subsidy. And then when they start talking about free enterprise, I want
Well, 300 prices,
I wanna
you throw it
punch
over the bank,
to, it's like this, it's not free enterprise. It's
throw it
a
out the
big,
window.
no, it's a big government subsidy to
Yeah.
big, yes, it
Yeah.
is. That's a separate issue. Because right now, part of that's the subsidy we set up, that you make the profit, we'll take care of the waste, is basically what we're society. We're gonna socialize the waste. But part of how we have socialized the waste is by eliciting companies who are not soda manufacturers or who are recycling companies. And we've elicited them that, you know, you want to make a profit here, here's something you can do to make a profit. You work with us and provide this service.
When they came out with no deposit, no return, the capitalist businesses were socializing the solution. Because it had to be landfills and trash and pick up on the side of the road.
You're having an argument with me that I'm not having with you.
We're not having an argument.
Okay.
We're saying the same thing.
I'm still not going on the road trip with you two.
Mr. Chair, can I make one point?
Anyway,
Because Senator McCormick, I think what you're hearing is something that I'm hearing, which is Casella does a wonderful job. We cannot fault them for their innovative work that they've done in waste management. I mean, that's, when you compare them nationally, they're leaders. So it is hard to look at a leader in waste management and say, we are going to change the rules of the road for you at this point. However, I think that the benefit that we're going to get with how we recycle is greater. And I also think that we're giving them till 2027. And there is a long runway for this, and they are innovative and they are a smart group of folks. And we will find out how they work through this system, and it'll improve for the redemption centers who were in our district. We heard from her and her husband that they are struggling. So there is a bit of who can spend their time in the State House and argue effectively. And I think we've heard really well from the more profitable side of this. And we haven't necessarily heard in the general way that we do from the people who are the smaller businesses, like our redemption centers, as strongly. So I do think we've heard a little bit of weightedness to this conversation, and on the ground, I think it'll have a positive impact on our redemption centers. And Casella is a very smart business. And by 2027, as we're working through this process, I think they will be able to true up some of their concerns. So maybe we'll have those reverse vending machines everywhere. I don't know. Maybe they'll be doing redemption pickup, because it'll now be worth their time and money. I don't know.
If Casella doesn't figure it out, someone else will.
So Mr. O'Grady, I think the only, let me just double check, the only draft request we have is for some draft language on a small producer.
And combo,
Yeah.
retailer, distributor, manufacturer.
Page 6.
I just want to make sure our one and only
I
draft.
thought you also wanted language on education.
Oh, yeah,
Oh.
yeah, thank you. I knew there was a second thing and I couldn't remember what it was. So, is it, and I'm just rethinking a little bit, do you have, can you, write that up so we could look at it tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great. We're not going that far afield, so we're starting. Thank you, everyone.
So you wanted separate though. You said you don't want the
Don't want it.
language in like you want it as a committee amendment? How do you want it drafted? You
Sure.
said you,
How about as a committee amendment? Then it's just gonna be easy to look at as a discrete thing. If we like it, then we'll be good to go, like it in. Okay.
With both changes.